Well, class is in session. My name is Emma.
Oh, I'm Matt. I
We're
didn't know we were
doing our
jumping into it.
best. I guess. I mean, you clapped. I thought we were
I did
good.
true, yeah. This is the worst part. Is in my mind, I was thinking I'm gonna mess up, even though my lines are "I'm Matt," and I'm gonna mess it up somehow. So here we are. This is why I prepare
Well,
everything in my head 40 times over.
okay. Well, we are the failed film students, college friends who have done nothing with our film degrees and are trying to find any way to put them to good use. So, how are you feeling today, Matt?
Like
Good.
on the whole, or
However you want to take it.
I was feeling great until I found out they're tearing down Muppet 3D Vision at Disneyland. So
Oh, yeah, I heard about that a long time ago, actually.
yeah, they're changing that from Monsters Inc. Land, but they are doing like a Muppet roller coaster now, which
Well,
is like that's
there's at
neat.
least that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take what I can
Um,
get. But how
uh,
are you doing?
I'm doing okay, you know? I think I'm getting my second wind from my lack of sleep from writing notes for this video. So, I'm just going to explain how this goes. So, Matt and I are going to be your poorly prepared professors today and go through each episode one by one, talking about things you may not have noticed, theories we have, the deeper themes, and of course, our thoughts on the creative direction of the film, which is in this case a mini series. We're not, average professors. We're cool professors.
Not like a regular mom. I'm a cool mom. Right, Regina? Please stop talking.
And we might end up just cracking jokes half of the time, but we will find out. Just to be warned, this is a spoiler filled movie review, so cue future me adding a spoiler review title card here. You need to have done your homework and seen the show before watching this breakdown. I highly recommend it. It was very good, but if you're rebellious and skip the homework, to be honest, there's really nothing we can do to stop you. So
It's a free world.
it's a free country, for now. um, for today's video, we will be discussing the 10-episode miniseries Over the Garden Wall, which premiered on Cartoon Network in 2014, which doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but technically was a long time ago.
It's about 10 years, yeah. No, I got recommended the show the year it came out, and I haven't watched it until now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't watch it until like I think this year as well. But yeah, I didn't know it existed cuz I mean, Cartoon Network was kind of in its like random LOL humor time
Yeah,
at that point. And so I was just kind of not really watching anything except for Gravity Falls was good. I will say.
I still haven't seen that one.
Dude, yeah, you got to. It's good. Um
Yeah.
it's about two young boys who find themselves in the unknown, which are mysterious woods filled with beauty and yet something dangerous lurking around every corner. Not knowing how they got there, the boys must find their way out without getting taken by the beast. And yeah, I wrote that myself. No chat GPT required. So let's just go over like our first impression in general with it. So I was the one who picked the series. I had decided to watch it basically on a whim once because it was free on Hulu. Well, not free, but like I have Hulu and Disney Plus, so I had it, and I noticed it had like a pretty stacked cast, specifically with Elijah Wood and Christopher Lloyd of Back to the Future fame. But on first viewing, like I just thought it was like an aesthetic show, and so like while I found it cute, I lost interest after a few episodes. But after I found out it was like not just an artsy series for like fall or whatever, but in fact had lots of like deep meaning in it, my curiosity kicked in and I watched it again. And this time I was like sucked in. And I think it's a perfect Halloween watch for anybody young or old. What did you think?
I going in, I kind of knew about like it was a show that, like you said, starts off looking very innocent and then turns into something a bit more mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of knew that before going into it, but I had just forgotten about it for a long time. But then you mentioned the connection to like Dante's Inferno, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm kind of vaguely familiar with that. And it's like I'll go in and watch it. And so I remember I got sick, so I took a sick day from work, and I just binged the entire show, and I was like, this is really good. So no, and then I started picking the pieces together of like all the connections there, some of the deeper themes, and just the general feeling of the show, like art style wise, story wise, was really interesting to me. It reminded me a lot of like old Cartoon Network because, like
Mm-hmm.
you said, it came out during a time when it was like very much just the lol random humor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I grew up with like, I mean, okay, I kind of grew up with that with like Billy and Mandy and Flapjack. But it definitely reminded me of like Adventure Time or
Yeah.
a little bit of like regular show, just kind of the more put together, clever jokes, clever writing, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Not Uncle Grandpa.
I do love Uncle Grandpa though.
Uh, yeah, I was like a Ben 10, huge Ben 10 fan. I still
Oh
would
man,
say I
yeah.
am. And so that's why I was like on Cartoon Network as a kid. But I did like Billy and Mandy when I was younger. My parents didn't like it. They were annoyed by it, but I thought it was cool. But
I
anyway,
love that show.
so
My dad loves that show.
did you know like Billy is the same guy who voices Invader Zim?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know. I just figured I was like we both like that show too.
Yeah,
Um
that's a good one.
So then you have like some background information, right? Is that true
A
or
little
no?
bit, yeah. I know the creator of the show worked on a little bit of Adventure Time, a little bit of Flapjack, and I think there was one other show that I had seen. So kind of going into it, I knew a little bit of what the guy had written before.
Mm-hmm.
But this was like a pretty big. Oh, he wrote Pinocchio, the newest one that was done by Guillermo del Toro.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, he was the screenwriter for that,
I did not
which is
know that.
super interesting. I didn't either until I looked him
Yeah.
up in IMDb, but that was super cool because the Adventure Time episodes and Flapjack episodes, that's a bit more comedy focused. So this is a pretty big step for him to go from comedy to like, here's my own short, and
Mm.
here's something a bit more serious, like still kind of grounded in like that kiddish sort of like adventure and fun,
Mm-hmm.
childlike innocence, I guess, especially with Greg, to kind of
Yeah.
then transition to something a bit more, maybe not adult, but mature. So I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
really neat.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and I'm kind of skipping around, but I saw somewhere somebody mention how Over the Garden Wall is almost like akin to a modern fairy tale style.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that he worked on Pinocchio, which is very fairy tale-y, that makes sense. Like maybe that's something he like is into. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it makes more sense as well when you know that Guillermo del Toro was kind of that same art style. I mean, this is a whole other discussion I'm getting into, but Guillermo del Toro did Pan's Labyrinth, which I would say is very much like a modern fairy tale, and so them working
Mm.
together on that just like made perfect sense. And so I think there was definitely some crossover of where, like you said, it's definitely more modern fairy tale feeling, and just the general storybook feeling in general. The show has is great. Yeah,
Yeah, like it's interesting because like a lot of people just think Disney when they think fairy tale, but I feel like Disney is a particularly optimistic approach to fairy tales, where most fairy tales they are adorable in some ways and then also terribly frightening on the other
yeah,
side.
yeah.
And so I do think that the show gets into that pretty well, but let's go to the first episode, chapter 1, which is called The Old Grist Mill. A brief synopsis of it is that Wirt and Greg find themselves in the unknown. It just opens with them there. They're already there. We don't know why. And they take shelter in an oil mill with a strange man. So I want to go over the intro real quick to the first episode because I really like how they tie it all together by showing these snapshots that's in a stylistic, like, it's not a fisheye, but it's like dark everywhere. And then, do you know what that's called?
Yeah,
Yeah.
vignettes.
Vignette. Ooh, fancy. So yeah, there's snapshots in these little vignettes of things that you will see throughout the series, and then at the end there's more snapshots that kind of wrap it up. So there's a lot of Easter eggs in this. They're all stuff that when you first watch it, I just kind of thought, oh, this is just like stylistic, cutesy stuff. But after you've watched the show, so when I was rewatching it, I realized that basically everything that is shown in the order that they are shown in the series. So,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. So first of all, we have the super swanky frog playing a rotating piano, which is a strong start to any show, I believe.
absolutely. Every show needs to have that from now on.
First snapshot we see is of Beatrice in her human form with a dog, which is the very same dog we will meet in this first episode that turns into the beast due to the black turtle being lodged in his throat. The next snapshot we see is a black cat riding a pumpkin cart with two turkeys pulling it along. This appears to be within the town of Pottsfield, which appears in episode 2. And the cat, I say remember him because he comes back later at the end in the last snapshot, and it reveals something. I think maybe, possibly. In the third snapshot, we see circus performers, and this is in reference to episode 3 as the gorilla juggling, like back in the back. We
Oh
find
yeah.
out later, yeah, is Jimmy Brown, who is stuck in a gorilla suit. Next, we see toy figurines of the tavern folk that we visit in episode 4. Then we see Quincy Endicott in his fancy home staring at the portrait of a woman and then being spooked by a passing shadow, which is episode 5. Then we see the ominous close-up of Adelaide knitting using what we later come to discover are magical scissors in episode 6. And then we actually have 2 snapshots that reference episode 6 in particular, which I don't know why that one just gets extra. Maybe it was to time it with the music, right? But the next one is 2 boys in sailors' outfits who are sending a toy ferry across the pond, which is a reference to the ferry in episode 6 as well. And then the next one I really liked a lot on the second viewing because it was so creepy, because when you first see it, you don't know what it means. But the next snapshot is who we later learn is Laura, Lorna, from episode 7, which is a girl possessed by a cannibalistic demon, and she's setting her lantern light next to a wall of human bones that are all organized. So like some of the bones are just femurs, some of them are heads, which is cool because we don't realize that she killed them all until her episode, you know. Then we see the gray fish with his fishing line in a misty lake, which we see again in episode 8, which he really had no purpose, but I don't know, he was there hanging out. Then next is a shot of a painted rock being nabbed by Greg, which we realize later is him stealing it from his neighbor's garden, which we learned that in episode 9, and it's the rock he constantly uses for his rock facts. And I find it interesting, just as an aside, that it's already painted before he steals it, because I'm like, it feels like he would have painted that, but maybe old lady Daniels is just like an eccentric lady. I don't know. Finally, we see the huntsman's daughter looking forlorn as the huntsman. I wrote huntsman, but it's woodsman. I had a really hard time not saying huntsman like in Snow White, you know? But yeah, we see the woodsman's daughter looking sad as the woodsman chops wood behind her before looking off into the woods where the title card is revealed. And then the narrator, who we later discover at the very end, is the musical frog that Greg brings into the unknown, which was another thing I didn't notice originally, but the frog was also into the unknown with them. Like, he fell in the lake with them and was also in there, like, not originally a part of the unknown. As he speaks, we see we see like flashes, like in the dark. And at first I thought it was Wirt's perspective as he sinks into the lake, but then I actually realized it was Greg's perspective, as the silhouette floating in front of the shot has a cape like Wirt and then comes closer to the viewer, and we know Wirt is the one who grabs Greg out of the lake. And this is finally in reference to episode 10. So I really like that because it basically does give you, like, you don't realize it at the time, but it tells you how they end up in the unknown in the very beginning sequence, because it shows like very vague flashes of them in the water. But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that. That's actually super cool.
So episode 1 or chapter 1 or whatever starts with the two already in the unknown, and Wirt realizes he doesn't know where they are. In an effort to keep track of where they're going, Greg decides to leave a candy trail.
We're lost. We should have left a trail or something.
I can leave a trail of candy from my pants.
The reason he has so much candy in his pants, we don't know at the time, but then we realize it's later. It's because it's Halloween, and old lady Daniels gave him some candy. Immediately, we get a sense of the boys' differing personalities. Wirt, voiced by Elijah Wood, is an anxious, kind of neurotic teenager who is ready to wax poetic about the certain danger that he is more than willing to let drag him into the abyss.
I did notice several times in the show, like when he starts to go into like his poetry monologues, he gets cut off every single time.
Oh,
I thought it was
really?
funny. Yeah.
That's actually kind of funny. No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we later learned he is into poetry, which makes more sense. But in the beginning, you're just like, man, this guy's dramatic.
I'm like, wow, dude, you're just lost. Take a chill pill.
Yeah. Well, Wirt is, very negative. Greg is young and optimistic, and he's just happy to be along for the ride, as well as holding on to a frog that he just can't seem to find the right name for. They hear operatic singing in the distance, and then end up finding a strange man with an axe cutting down the forest trees, which seem to be leaking this dark, veiny substance. And Wirt is understandably a little fearful of an axe-wielding man in the forest at night. But then as he watches him leave, he second-guesses his decision to not ask him for directions. I noticed this entire... obviously, Wirt's character grows at the end, but this entire episode really showcases how completely unsure of himself Wirt is about literally everything at all.
It's bad. Yeah, he self-sabotages a lot, especially in this first episode. It's like he gets better at it, but you see that he kind of goes through like different stages of like kind of being spineless and then becoming stubborn for really no good reason. And then he goes back to being spineless, and then he goes to being angry and then hopeless, and then he finally kind of gains a backbone.
So a bird is listening into their conversation and offers her help. Yes, a talking bird, much to the confusion of Wirt, and the bird is named Beatrice. As they're talking, they accidentally alert the axe-slinging dude, and he demands to know what they are doing there. And the woodsman, who that is voiced by Christopher Lloyd. Greg absently places a piece of candy on a small black turtle here, which comes back into play at the end of the episode. They go back to the mill for shelter. Greg's still leaving his candy trail. And the woodsman explains that he spends all his time grinding the edelwood trees that litter the forest into oil to keep his lantern lit. He explains that this is his lot in life and his burden. The woodsman overhears the boys whispering about escaping and possibly knocking him out to do it, and tells them they can leave if they wish, but to fear the beast who is always looking for lost souls. He leaves, and then Wirt again is like, oh, is the woodsman right? I don't know. Is he wrong? I don't know. And then I basically just wrote that his indecisiveness is incredibly strong.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
It really makes it hard to root for him in this first episode because he just like, I don't know. Well, and Greg's not helping either, but Greg's like completely innocent to the to all of it. So it's like, it's just we're constantly saying like, oh, we should do this, and then he backs out of it, and then Greg's like, well, I'm already doing it.
Commitment issues for real.
Which ties into the later episode, I think the episode 9. So.
Oh, can you explain what you mean?
Well, because with what's her name? Sarah, I think the girl.
Sarah?
Yeah, where he constantly wants to like, oh, I want to write her. I made this tape. I want to give it to her.
Yeah.
And then he backs out of doing that. Yeah, and then and Greg's like, here's, I'll deliver your tape for you, and then he just immediately goes and runs off and does that. So it's this constant like game of like cat and mouse of like, oh, I really want to do this, but I don't want to do it that way, so I'm not going to do it at all.
Yeah, wishing he could do stuff, but never like feeling brave enough to actually do it, for sure.
Yeah, to step out into the unknown.
Yeah. bothered by Greg's innocent nature and peppy attitude, despite the confusing situation, Wirt sends him out to look for his frog, which has gone missing. While looking for the frog, Greg runs into a dog-like creature with these like LED-looking light eyes. And I really love how when he's about to get eaten, he's like, "You have beautiful eyes," before he dies.
You have beautiful eyes.
So the woodsman returns from grinding oil just as Greg leads the monster into the mill and knocks out the woodman just like they planned, because sometimes Greg just doesn't like to do things the easy way. And the beast crashes into the mill, destroying much of it, but stops to savor some candy Greg throws at him. So they surmise that Greg must have led the monster to them with his candy trail. Greg throws more candy into the mill, and the monster dives after it, getting crushed by the wheel and spitting up a small black turtle with a candy on it from before. This spitting up the turtle turns the monster into a normal dog. The woodsman awakes to mourn basically the destruction of his home. But Wirt assures them that they solved the beast problem, pointing to the peaceful little dog. But the woodsman shouts that the dog is not the beast, and that the beast is the death of hope and steals children. Wirt, of course, blames Greg for the situation, but the woodsman corrects him, saying that as the elder child, it is Wirt's responsibility to keep them safe. And I must say, okay, I was so happy that he said that, because I am an oldest child, and I was so mad with Wirt the entire episode, because he's just like, yeah, little child, go out into these woods at night, you know, and just see what happens. Like, I don't want to do it. And I was just like, he also, like, running away from the monster, he literally leaves Greg in the room with the monster and just skedaddles out of there. And I was like,
it's bad, dude.
it's so bad. And then even when he took the axe from him, it was only to shield himself. Like,
Yeah.
I did not like Wirt at the beginning of this series at all.
No, it's definitely like it's especially awkward going into episode 9. I don't want to jump too much into that episode until we get to there, but especially just because they're so connected, the first episode and episode 9.
Yeah.
'Cause that's where we see those two raw episodes have their personalities back to square one. Just the total disinterest in doing anything with Greg. Just total self-preservation with Wirt, and it's like full force in episode 1 and 9. So it makes it hard, but also makes you really understand the growth that he's come through in episode 10. With most shows that you watch where a character has like growth or whatever, it's kind of hard to see it in an exponential format. You're just like, oh yeah, this person's different. They've become a bit more mature. They've achieved their goals. But I like how at this time it's like, no, we're going to show you, like, we're going to go back to square one before we get to the finale to say, like, here's how Wirt was. Now you get to see him at like his full, most confident self. And I was like, I thought it was neat. It was really just a better way to handle that, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that being them deciding to reveal. I mean, I like them revealing what happened at the end in general, because I like when movies have faith in their audiences to handle not knowing things for a little while so that it can pay off. But I also, I agree, that's interesting because it does like further contrast the difference between his character in the beginning of the story and the end. Like, that's part of why like people were mad about in the Avatar remake them making Sokka not a misogynist, and they're like, well then the payoff isn't there when he like gets better. To put it,
Yeah.
All right, so the very end of the story in this episode is that the woodsman tells Wirt to take his brother, go north, and look for a town, understandably not wanting them to stay once they absolutely obliterated his home. Before they go, however, he leaves them with an ominous warning to beware the unknown and fear the beast, and to escape the woods, if they can. And this I kind of read as him passing on his burden of fear, which it is. It does come back at the very end. Wirt says something, which we can get to at the last part. that refers to this line that he says in the beginning where he's like, "This is my burden to bear," which is keeping the lantern lit. He doesn't end up dying by the beast. He keeps going, but he keeps going still for a very negative reason, which is what keeps him stuck there. I don't know, maybe.
No, I see what you're saying, where it's two different methods of like, you can either continue through spite or you can continue through like hope and perseverance. And that's the kind of
Yeah.
two contrasting things. The Woodsman, in a way, is kind of like a mirror of Wirt.
Yeah. Did you have anything to say about the animation in this episode? Because obviously, for anyone who's never seen it, from the first episode, you can tell right away that the music and the animation style is just very vintage. It has a nostalgic feel to the creative direction, which really makes it stand out in comparison to a lot of Cartoon Network's. Oops, sorry, my Siri was activated somehow. Anyway, so there's a very nostalgic feel to the to the creative direction of this mini series, which really makes it stand out in comparison to most of Cartoon Network's other shows at the time. So, did you? Because I know you looked into like specific animation for different episodes. Is this one that you had one for, or?
Not for this one, but I think it'd be a good one just to talk about generally what I noticed across the show. I thought the background art was amazing. One of the top things you see with a lot of cartoon shows nowadays is that they don't put a ton of attention into their backgrounds.
Yeah.
Every single episode, each background was unique, and it felt kind of like a painting almost. I think the first like artist that pops into my mind is like a Thomas Kincaid painting, where it's very sort of kind of fairy tale looking, a lot of bright, vibrant colors. And just kind of a warm feeling in general. This does have like that cozy autumn feeling to it, especially later on when they're walking through the woods and it has all those autumn colors, and especially when you get to Pottsfield.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get into it more later about the colors and I think just the lack of them that we see later on, which becomes
Yeah.
interesting. So, but no, I felt like everything was very intentionally designed, intentionally put there. Even stuff that was like drawn on top of the backgrounds, like the woodsman's mill or the interiors and stuff like that. That didn't feel like it was just like, oh, here's this fancy, elaborate background, and here's like a cell shaded building. No, it felt like it was still woven into there.
Yeah. And I would say also along with that, because yes, it is incredibly autumny and all of that, is I, especially on the second time through, really noticed the way they use lighting is super unique and helps them tell the story very well. And I really like when people make choices with the lighting, because it's something a lot of people don't think about when they try to make something look unique, but it ends up having such a huge effect in how something looks, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is a 3 Theory segment.
So I actually did write out my top 3 theories for this episode. The rest of the episodes, it kind of, my notes are a little spotty, but let me just see. The first one is about the narrating frog, essentially, which we don't know is the frog in the first episode, but the narrator at the beginning of the show. So he says something specifically in the beginning, which on my second watch, I realized could answer some questions in regards to how time works in the unknown, since everyone in the unknown appears as if from a distant time period, even though we later learn that Wirt and Greg are from a more modern time period, which I'd wager is sometime around the 80s or 90s, since they have like tapes and everything.
Yeah.
And he says, long forgotten stories are revealed to those who travel through the wood. So this caused me to ask, are people of the unknown and these towns simply reflecting long forgotten stories? Is everyone a fabrication of the realm to teach a lesson? Or are they all long forgotten because they have died long ago? Or does the unknown, like purgatory, exist in a space outside of time where Beatrice and her colonially dressed family may enter at a similar time as two boys from the 80s? Looking back as well, which I'll get to this, I don't know that Beatrice doesn't just exist in the unknown. Because at my first watch, I thought she was like Wirt and Greg and was trying to get home and out of the unknown. But lots of people live in the unknown that are normal human people, like the rich people, in the tea company episode. And so I'm like, her family could just live in the unknown and have gotten turned into bluebirds.
That's what I figured, especially since we see, I think at least her mom later on. I think in episode
Yeah.
8 or 10, I forget which one it is. I kind of figured they just exist in there. I can't get too in depth with what I want to say because I have a lot to say when we get to
Yeah.
my half. So that's all I'll say for now.
Okay, because yeah, I am also kind of by saying that going a little bit further into my last theories but that okay, that's the first one is just long forgotten stories are revealed to those who travel through the wood. Are the people in the unknown basically there as lessons, or are they long forgotten because they're from a distant time or outside of time, blah blah blah. So second theory, the creator has admitted that the black turtles actually don't have a specific explanation. And it's true, we don't get an answer for what they represent or why they do what they do, even though they do significant things throughout throughout the show. But it is important to note the effect that these turtles have and that there is a pattern of the black turtles being eaten. So the other character that we see eating loads of black turtles, like tons, is Lorna's aunt. And is it possible that these turtles don't make you evil, but perhaps instead affect your appearance, as the dog was only really after more candy and only happened to be dangerous due to the growth in its size it had under the turtle's influence? And Lorna's aunt similarly had a strange, unsettling appearance, but her intentions weren't evil. So others wonder if the turtles are created by drops of Edelwood oil, and that's why they're black. I don't know if there's really any evidence to support that, but I've heard that online. But yeah, I think the turtles, like, as far as what we know, they definitely affect your appearance because they change the dog to be crazy looking, and they change Lorna's aunt to have like black goo and she looks wild. Specifically in the eyes, they have different eyes, but they both have weird eyes. So I'm like, they don't make you evil, but they at least affect how you look somehow, maybe.
I could see that, yeah. I really didn't pick up too much on the turtles. I just kind of figured they were like a random MacGuffin or just something funny that they put in there. It does make sense because, like you said, the dog turns into something kind of possessed and weird. So I'm almost wondering if maybe it's connected to like the beast in somehow. But I wonder if they're like maybe a part of him or something that he sends out there that have like his watchers or like have eyes around the
Spies.
forest, something like that. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
I mean, I would believe that. I definitely was disappointed by the fact that the dog's eyes look exactly like the beast's eyes, and we never get an explanation for why that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
So I feel like there
Which,
has to be some kind of connection.
yeah, there has to be something, even though obviously the creator said that he didn't know what it was, but
Yeah.
we could come up with an answer. But yeah, so I just thought that was interesting because I was like, they definitely do a lot of interesting stuff, but it's like never explained. But if they were spies, I think that makes sense. Last theory is the dog that we see in the first snapshot with Beatrice's dog, or just a fellow traveler in the unknown that she came in contact with. Actually, this theory is answered in the end, and yeah, but when I was rewatching, I was like, oh yeah, is the dog Beatrice's dog? And then when I got to the end, spoiler alert, it probably is. It's very likely her dog. The only other thing I put is I guess dogs don't count as family because the dog isn't turned into a bluebird. But I mean, that
that is
makes
true.
sense to me. And now just go for your Dante stuff. Go for it.
Dante! Dante's Inferno! You're gonna die!
Okay, this is where I become a little schizophrenic with how I'm going to handle this. So before I jump into the Dante's Inferno connections, I have to give like a slight overview of Dante's Inferno, which if you don't know, it's the full work is called The Divine Comedy, and it's Dante entering the nine circles of hell on a mission from God. And his whole quest is just to go through the nine layers, experience all of them unharmed, and then return back to the surface, and that's it. And meanwhile, he is guided by Virgil, which was another poet of his time and someone he considered his master. And so the two of them walk through. Virgil's kind of his guide through there because Virgil exists in purgatory because he existed before Jesus, and anyone who was born before Jesus but didn't really do anything bad just exists in purgatory. So it's like, oh yeah, you're a good person, but Jesus didn't die for your sins yet, so now you're just in purgatory and you get to hang out there. I have to emphasize as well, this is not like any religious belief. This was Dante's own personal beliefs. So it's not condoned by the Catholic Church in any way. In fact, there's some stuff later, when I'll get into later circles, that the Catholic Church was like, dude, you got to calm down on what you're putting in the circles of hell. So those kind of the basic overview for the characters and kind of connecting them to Over the Garden Wall. Dante is very clearly worked. Dante was a poet, worked as a poet, and they both kind of share that very similar, what would I call it? Like just lack of confidence. In the very beginning of Dante's Inferno, Dante has like zero confidence whatsoever. He's constantly getting scared of things. He's kind of freaking out. Virgil is the far more like, hey, I'm just kind of hanging out here. I kind of know what's coming. I know what to expect. And Virgil is definitely connected to Greg, although I think Virgil's connected to Beatrice in a way as well because they both share similar qualities. But Beatrice is Beatrice in Dante's Inferno. But the funny thing about her in Dante's Inferno is that Beatrice only shows up as an angel and says, hey, you need to explore the 9 layers of hell, and then she just disappears. And that's all we see Beatrice. Yeah.
Which angels have wings? Ooh.
They do. But something that is funny is that Dante does this a lot. He'll just kind of take someone from his own personal life, put them in a positive or negative light, and just kind of say like, oh, like Beatrice was his lover in life who unfortunately passed away, I think. And so he makes her this angel from heaven and gives him his quest to go through the 9 layers of hell. But you'll see later on, Dante was not a big fan of people who were against Rome in any way. So I can't say who because it'll be a big spoiler, but some people who helped in the destruction of Rome are in the 9th layer of hell with Lucifer, and it's not good for them. But Caesar, the guy who hated Jesus, is just hanging out in purgatory on a throne. So,
Right.
yeah. So, okay, but diving into the first episode, I would say, is not even the first layer of of hell. It's more or less the gates into there. Wirt and Greg have a very similar opening to Dante's Inferno, where Dante just kind of wakes up in the forest, doesn't really know why he's there or how he got there. And then Virgil kind of comes up and says, hey, what are you doing here, man? And then they start to go and walk. And then, of course, Beatrice comes down. And as they walk, they kind of just see things around them in the outside of hell. What's interesting is that there is an inscription above the gate of hell before they walk through it. And I'm going to read the whole thing. It is, through me is the way to the city of woe. Through me is the way to eternal pain. Through me is the way to a lost people. Justice moved my creator. Divine power made me. The supreme wisdom and the primal love. Before me, nothing else was created. Nothing but the eternal, and I last eternally. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And what I think is that the woodsman acts as sort of that warning. Because if you notice, he calls the woods the devourer of hope. And I think
I was just looking for that in my notes. I was like, he says something about that in there. Yeah.
So when he says abandon all hope, ye who enter here, he's talking about entering the woods. So I don't think the woodsman is a specific character in Dante's Inferno. I think he's just that constant reminder of the inscription above the gate of hell. So that's sort of my first connection. They're not in hell yet. They still could walk away from this if they wanted to, but they're definitely outside the gates and they're walking in now. And Yeah, episode 2 is when they enter the first layer.
Yeah, I didn't think about him as like the warning itself. But that is true. That's like half of all he does in the show is
All he
warn them
does is
constantly.
be like, "Be aware, be aware."
That's my Christopher Lloyd.
It's pretty spot on.
Thank you.
When he was asleep, I opened his skull and removed his brains. You did?
Thank you for listening to the first episode in our Over the Garden Wall series for the failed film students. And class is out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.